My name is Robert Blankinship, born in 1951. My father and uncles grew up in a house with their uncle, the man I was named after, who was a Civil War soldier. He fought in the 10th Texas Cavalry. His name was Robert Blankinship. And so the stories that were passed down from him to them and ultimately to me are stories that I'll be sharing with y'all today. And I won't add or delete anything from them. I do have two letters I'll share with you in just a minute on the death of my oldest great uncle, Charlie. He was assigned to the 35th Texas Cavalry and died in the Matagorda area. He was part of the Matagorda campaign in 1864. But before I get to that point, I'll give you a little bit of background so what you read in these letters will make some sense to you. When my great-grandfather, Benjamin Franklin Blankinship, came to Texas in 1848, Uncle Charlie, as we call him, and Uncle Bob had already been born in Tennessee. There was a third child, my grandfather, on the way at the time. When they got here, my grandfather, Benjamin Franklin Blankinship, who was a tanner by trade, was so excited about being in Texas and the new prosperity that he envisioned. The first thing he did was make a billfold. And I'm blessed and fortunate to have it. And here it is. He made it out of a raccoon. And this is the tail. And inside he has signed his name to it. So I know that it's actually his. And I tell you that story because I'm going to tell you another story about leather in just a minute or two. But so the Blankenships in around 46 came and they built a tannery down on the banks of Lizard Run Creek. I still own the property where the tannery sat. And between farming and working in the tannery and making things for people, that's what Charlie and his daddy did for a living. When the war broke out, Charlie was 16 years old, and Uncle Bob was 14 years old. Charlie wanted to go fight. Bob did too. But his parents said, no way, you're both too young, we're not going to let you go. And apparently there was a lot of arguing and constant bickering because both boys wanted so desperately to go. And ultimately, the parents, Benjamin Franklin and Elizabeth, told Charlie when he turned 18 that they were going to let him go with the understanding that my great-grandfather, Benjamin Franklin, was going to go with him. They were going to sign up together, and they were going to be a part of the same outfit so they could take care of one another. And so when Charlie turned 18, they went out to the tannery and they made themselves two custom-made pairs of, actually three custom-made pairs of boots for themselves, one for themselves. They made a third pair for my great-grandmother's brother. His last name was Lowe. You will see his name on the roster, I believe. I think Henry Lowe, of the roster of Lycan's 35th. So they get on their horses and they ride, and Uncle Earl vows and declares they went to Shreveport to sign up. And I guess that kind of makes sense in 1863. I think it was somewhere along there that Shreveport became the headquarters of the Trans-Mississippi Department, but I'm not exactly sure. And my dad wasn't sure that Uncle Earl was right, that they actually signed up in Shreveport. But as the family story goes, they ride to Shreveport, and they're standing there in line, and an officer, a high-ranking officer, comes by and he sees these three guys standing there with brand new boots on. So he walks up to him and he says, "Hey, where'd you guys get those boots?" And according to the story, my grandfather kind of got mad at him because he thought maybe he was accusing him of stealing them or something. And he jumped right back at him and said, "Well, these are our boots. We made these boots." And so the officer invited him to come visit with him, and they sat down somewhere and they talked about the tannery and making stuff out of leather and what my great-grandfather had done in the tannery business. And he finally says, "Well, okay, we don't want you," talking to the old man. "We don't want you. We're more important going back to your tannery and keeping it going and building things for the Confederacy." And he said, "Well, okay, but I need these boys with me to help me." And the officer said, "No, we need these boys are good fighting age. We're going to make good soldiers out of them. We're going to take good care of them. We can't let you have them. We need them." So he sort of just consoled himself as he rode back, thinking, well, at least whatever Love's first name was and my son are together, they can look out for one another. So he ended up coming back, and for the remainder of the war, Confederate supply trains would come right down this road, right through my back pasture and down to the creek, where they would pick up whatever great-granddad had made, harnesses, saddles, holsters, whatever they told him they needed, that's what he made. So,
how did he get his orders to make certain things?
You know, I've wondered that, and the only thing that I can think of is that every couple of months or however long, when they'd send some wagons down to pick up his stuff, that the guys on the wagons would say, "Okay, we'll be back. Here's what we want you to have next time." Mm-hmm. I don't have any evidence that he was actually an employee of the Confederacy. Maybe an independent contractor, I guess, so to speak.
Have you ever looked at Fold 3, or do you ever fool with that kind of stuff? It's on the internet.
No, I haven't.
Okay. All right. Well, one thing I'll do is, on this, since he did that, they have a Fold 3 is the National Archives, but it's all everything's digitized. Uh-huh. But they have a civilian section for the Civil War. Actually, I found my great-great-grandfather had sold wool to the Confederate Army. I got a receipt, bill of sale, with his name on it and the date and how much wool, and it was 75 cents a pound. And they paid $528, and he delivered it to San Antonio and everything.
Yeah. So
we'll look and see it and just just see if there's that miracle pops up and Mr. Blankinship maybe he sold some saddles or something.
That would be crazy.
I mean, odds are, but if we do, we do. We don't. Well, we haven't lost anything.
Yeah.
It takes me about 3 minutes to do a search.
Yeah.
But I'll check that since I know that.
Okay. Well, good. All right. So Charlie and them get assigned to Lykin's outfit, the 35th, and they are not too long. This was going to be in September of *64, and that winter we have the Battle of Galveston. Pretty good shootout there that Lykins was not involved in, to the best of my recollection, but it forced the Yankees to find another invasion point on the Texas coast. Apparently Lincoln was hot to trot to get Texas invaded, and to the best of my recollection, I think the next spot they tried was down on the Matagorda Peninsula. Have y'all been down that way? Are you familiar with that neck of the woods? Okay. So once, who was the general in command of the Trans-Mississippi Department? Kirby Smith.
Magruder was in charge of Texas.
And I don't remember if it was Magruder or Edmund Kirby Smith, but it was one of them who issued the order for the 35th and 3 or 4 other outfits to beat feet down to Matagorda when the Yankee fleet showed up there. And when they got down there, it had been one of the coldest winters, and the guys were really struggling to stay warm. And the Yankees chose, rather than to do a massive invasion, I'm telling y'all stuff that you already know. So
No, please go ahead. I'm anxious to hear your side of it. So,
that there were, instead of a massive invasion, there were smaller incursions, little small invasions here and there, with the enemy probing our lines in an effort to see if they could find weak points, is my understanding of it.
They were also looking for cattle to steal.
And anything they could steal. Pillage and plunder, absolutely. That's what the Yankees were famous for. And so anyway, it was in February, while that campaign was going on, that Uncle Charlie got sick. What I'm going to tell you in a few minutes is really going to scramble your brains, but I'm going to stop and go ahead and get out these letters. There are 2 letters that he was taken to a very nice plantation home of a Captain Rugeley, who was a captain in, are you ready for this, Brown's 35th Cavalry. And that's where he was nursed for about 3 weeks before he died. And so the first letter I'm going to show you is a letter from the sister of the wife of Captain Rugeley. I'm going to bring it to you. This is how I have them displayed. I do, and I have a lock of his hair that they enclosed in the letter. This is pretty easily readable.
At this point, how long had he been in the regiment?
He enlisted in September.
So he was
October, November, December, January, about 5 months.
5 months.
Hardeman, February 14th, 1864. Hardeman apparently is an area down there around Van Vleck. I've seen it mentioned a time or two in some history books. I don't know if it was a little settlement. I don't know what that means, but that's where this letter comes from. Mrs. Blankinship, dear Madam, I deeply regret that I'm compelled to write you the melancholy news of the death of your son, Charlie. Indeed, we gave him every attention and comfort, but alas, it was too late. His uncle was with him. My mother and self nursed him as tenderly as if we had been a son and brother. I know it must be distressing to you to know that he died from house. It's been scarcely a month since I lost a darling brother. He too died from house in a death so horrible. Your son will be buried today at my father's plantation near my brother. I send a piece of his hair. 'Tis the only memento I can send of your dead soldier boy. He was sick at our house almost 2 weeks. We all were attached to him and hated to see him die, but it was a pleasure to know he died so easily. Believe me, madam, that I sympathize with you deeply. I am respectfully your friend, E. Rugeley. And we paddled across Old Caney Creek to the cemetery and found the graves of the 2 soldiers right there within their family cemetery. They were covered with slave-made bricks. There were no headstones, so we didn't know which was which. But Uncle Charlie died 2 days after another soldier in his outfit died. And I'll give you his name in just a minute. In the old trunk at Uncle Earl's house, there was an envelope full of Confederate money, and I still have it. This is a just a couple of paragraphs out of one of the stories that I'm writing for my children. No one seems to know how it happened, but there were 2 regiments involved in the defense of Matagorda with exactly the same distinction. The 35th Texas Cavalry. Those reading this might want to do additional research. Those wanting to do additional research should remember that Uncle Charlie's unit was referred to as Lycan's 35th Texas after its colonel. The other regiment is frequently referred to as Brown's. Sadly, the greatest disaster of this campaign happened to Brown's 35th. On December the 30th, 1863, the men in that outfit got into boats and skiffs to attack the enemy on the Matagorda Peninsula. While rowing across the bay, a huge storm came up and swamped some of the boats, resulting in the death of 22 Confederate soldiers under the command of Captain E.S. Rougeley. One of the dead was his own brother, who was 17 years old. The winter had been very cold, and while some of the men drowned, most simply froze to death before help could come. Remember the name Rougeley, you will see it again. The winter had been a harsh one, and with so many soldiers concentrated in such a small area, finding adequate food and shelter was almost impossible. More men were lost to sickness than Yankee gunfire. Uncle Charlie was one of many that the Yankees could not kill, but germs did. So when the Union fleet sailed away from Matagorda on March 31st, 1864, the surviving Texans breathed a collective sigh of relief. In his book, Lone Star, T.R. Fehrenbach states, historians generally regard the defense of the Texas coast as one of the greatest military feats of the Confederacy. In a way, they did get to go home, but not the way they wanted to. The Union invasion fleet was not giving up. On the contrary, they were looking for another place to invade Texas. This time, they had their eye on East Texas.
They have what they call a norther or un norte that comes through, and this is what happened to Brown's men and others. It goes from 80 degrees, and then the wind chill comes in, and with the humidity, it just gets frosty. So and imagine being in wet wool, and that just, I mean, it was a ticket for illness. It just, the Union troops on the island, I've read an account by their major general, and he said they had tons of overcoats. They called them greatcoats that were real thick. But even those, once you got them soaking wet, their men were freezing to death as well.
Probably why so many of those guys drowned.
Yeah, they were.
Well, that Brown's thing, that when they were, they just froze the water so cold.
Yeah.
I mean, there was an account of at Cedar Lake, a guy on guard duty one night froze to death on guard duty.
Yeah.
One of the guards froze to death. So it was a bitter, bitter cold winter for Texas.
Wow.
There's a
Book
book
364.
that's available on Amazon, and it's called The Civil War Letters of Lewis Lehman, Lehnmann. I helped with that book. He was a German in Lycan's regiment, Company D. He was from Washington County, so not necessarily close to us. And he wrote about that. In fact, his unit found these frozen soldiers, and he wrote to his wife. Now, here's what was really bizarre about this. He was writing in German, because he was a German. And his wife understood German. So he didn't write in English. So he writes these letters to his wife, and his wife saves the letters. Their daughter gets married and inherits everything from the family. And she decides she doesn't want her kids growing up in Texas with Texas schools, which she sends her kids and her whole family back to Germany. And they don't ever return to Texas. So the letters are in Germany. There is a professor who kind of had his own ideas. And he goes over to Germany to see if there are letters from Union troops that they might have written back to their families in Germany. And he wants to get a collection of Civil War letters from Germans. And he is particularly and almost exclusively interested in Union, because there couldn't possibly be any Confederates. He finds these, and he's quite upset. They are eventually translated into English. A descendant, who happens to be from Beaumont, but he's a descendant, gets a hold of these and works partly with me and some other people, and gets it published by Hill College. And like I said, you can get it on Amazon. Now, the one problem that I have with him on this is you translate in German, an old form of German, by somebody who has an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So they differed in the interpretations. I'm not a German speaker, so I have to take their word, but I just was like, no, I don't think that that's what they meant. I lost a couple battles with them. I won some. It got published, and if you read it, it kind of has a Union slant to it.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely does. And the incident that's described with these soldiers, I looked over that. I saw the original letters. Of course, couldn't translate them, but and it was my feeling that what was happening is the 13th Maine was moving up the coast, and the Confederates knew it. They could see them moving up Matagorda Peninsula because the peninsula is not that wide, and they could see them going up the beach because the beach is hard sand, and it's easier to walk on that hard sand than through the dunes.
Mm-hmm.
So they could see them, and they thought, we can trap them. So Brown's men and Bushell's, that's the 1st and the other 35th, are at one end of the peninsula. And then some of Brown's men get in boats, and they're going to come up from behind and try to catch the 13th Maine. That was their plot. Now, the 13th Maine, for whatever reason, they retreated. And they turned tail and they ran. The commander believed that he was badly outnumbered. He thought he had about 6,000 Confederates coming against him. He didn't. He didn't. At best, he had maybe 600 Confederates, and that would be a stretch. He got behind these guys. You know, he managed to avoid being completely captured and surrounded. Won the Medal of Honor, by the way, for his saving the Union troops. Yeah.
What was his name?
Hasseltine. 13th Maine. And you know, you just look it up, 13th Maine, Medal of Honor, et cetera, et cetera. So Lycan's men and Brown's men and Bushell's men show up and they see these guys frozen. Their boats overturned. They got in the water. It was, I'm going to guess, sub-zero. So that once they got wet and they were in that water when their boats overturned because the storm came up on them, they did not have a chance. And it wasn't, according to the translator, it wasn't that they were idiots or that they, had a death wish or, that their commander was some psycho. It was really a strategic move that when the weather came up, they didn't have the weather service. They didn't know this storm was coming. They would not have done it had they known that the storm was coming, because most of these men, like Rugeley, Rugley, etc., they were from that area. They lived there. They grew up. They knew that area like the back of their hands. They would not have made that mistake. They wouldn't, and certainly the captain would not have willfully wished his family members to die and everybody else. But in the book, it's, again,
slanted.
It's slanted, like these idiot psycho Confederates
Yeah.
who were so dumb.
Yeah. What was the name of the book again?
Civil War Letters of Lewis Lehman.
Okay.
And again, it's on Amazon. Hill College, you all know about Hill College.
Yes. Yes.
So that's a slightly, different story, but close to what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Love it, love it, love it. I made a note, you were talking about the clothing that they were wearing. I just made a note here for future reference. The state penitentiary in Huntsville produced 1.5 million yards of cloth each year out of cotton and wool for the Confederacy.
Yeah, yeah. And you know about the clothing depot down in Houston?
No.
Okay, in Houston, they got that cloth and they made it into jackets.
Uh-huh.
And our men wore what are referred to now as Houston Depot jackets. There is an example of the Houston Depot jacket on display at Mansfield. And the Houston Depot jackets didn't just go to, obviously, Houston, Texas. They were supplied to the rest of the Trans-Mississippi. So some Louisiana troops, some obviously Texas troops, they got these. You can see the jackets in some of the very few, I will refer to them as photographs, that were taken because there was a photo studio in Houston. And there was also a company which made buttons, and the buttons were by a guy by the name of T. Miller. These T. Miller buttons are very different from any other Confederate button because they have the letter, like what you would expect, and then lines behind the letter. So our ancestors probably were in T. Miller buttons and Houston Depot jackets. And we have documentation of them being issued those jackets in Houston.
Wow.
Right prior to being shipped off to Matagorda Peninsula.
Yeah. Wow.
So, just FYI.
Okay.
That's great.
Well, are we ready to hear this letter?
Yes.
February 14th, 1864, Hardeman, Matagorda County. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Blankinship, it becomes my painful duty this morning to inform you of the death of your beloved son, C.W.B. He departed this life on the 13th instant at 40 minutes after 6 in the evening after an illness of 21 days, first measles and then typhoid pneumonia. Ben, this is a reference to Benjamin Franklin, Charlie's father. Ben, it was a hard thing to part with him. He was so kind to all of his fellow soldiers, and a better soldier never shouldered a gun in defense of his rights than Charlie. Did you tell me you took a picture of the marker that we have at Lowe's Chapel of Charlie? Well, on that marker, we put that quote, a better soldier never shouldered. I had seen him tried several times the next, and I believe that word is fortnight, I'm not sure, the next fortnight after I got to the command. We were called up to meet the foe, and poor Charlie and Henry Roberts and Henry Lowe, again, there's that Henry, and maybe I'm not reading it right, we'll look again on the original letter, never let any man beat them in line of battle. They were always in front next to their captain, and it was the same thing several times since near the mouth of Old Caney. Henry Roberts, poor boy, also departed this life on the 11th instant of the same disease. Lowe was taken first, but is getting well. Ben and Bet, I guess he referred to Elizabeth as Bet in this letter. Ben and Bet, he has only paid the debt we all have to pay sooner or later. I talked to him about dying and asked him if he was afeared to die. He said no, he believed that God would do right, and he had done no one any harm, although he talked so he was not in his right mind at times for days before he died. But he knew me as long as he could talk. I waited on him for 2 days and nights before he died. He called me nearly constant. He spoke frequently of his father and mother and the good advice that they had both given him. Ben, the boys I spoke of have the praise of being the best boys in our company, and right by the colonel and our captain, and all the company loves them like brothers, and will be sorry to hear of his death. They left 2 days since for Victoria, some 80 miles west of this. All was done for him that could have been done by anyone unless it was a better physician. He was at a good house, and I will add for your consolation that you and Bet could not have given him any more attention than the family E.L. Roberts did. I can never forget their kindness to the boys. The old lady and the girls waited on them like mother and sisters and furnished us with nice burying clothes for them both, and they will be buried in his family's graveyard in good coffins, and nicely put away Charlie will be buried this evening by the side of Henry R. I will direct you all his clothes, only one pair of pants and a gray roundabout he drew that I put on him, and one blanket Lieutenant John Murray kept back before I got, and there's a word I couldn't decipher, before I got something. And one I shall put in the coffin. Horse and rigging by R.E. Lang. He gave $25 to boot in swapping pants and has no money. You must pay Lang for bringing his things or pay the horse's expense. He was here when he died. And this is where the sideways writing comes. I will here add that I have hopes that while I am penning this, he is in a world where war is no more and the saints are at rest. Pray for us all that we may live honorable and faithful and do right and die in our right minds in the full sight of the paradise of God. I can add nothing more, only write to me you, and love this is to you all. The reason this is a force put to scrap, my better paper is scarce and hard to get. There are a couple of words coming next that I can't read, and then he ends it, your affectionate brother and friend till death, W.M. Roberts. And he adds a P.S. The old gentleman's name is Captain John Rugeley. He can walk around and will stay with him. I leave in the morning for the war.